Okay, I want to try a little experiment to kick things off. Just picture this.
Oh.
You're dropped into a market in a country where you don't speak a single word of the language. You're thirsty. You need water. What do?
Well, I assume I'd do what pretty much everyone does. I'd catch a vendor's eye, make a little cup shape with my hand, and, tip my head back.
Exactly. You mime it, and what, 9 times out of 10, they get it, they nod, they hand you a bottle. It just works.
Right.
And because that works, I think most of us, myself included, kind of walk around assuming that if we just stopped talking and only used our hands, we'd all be speaking the same language. That sign language is basically just universal charades.
And that right there is probably the single biggest, most common assumption about sign language.
Okay.
It's so intuitively appealing, and it makes sense on the surface, but it is completely fundamentally wrong.
See, I hear you say that, and part of me wants to believe you, but look, if I can mime water to someone in Tokyo or Timbuktu and they get it, how can sign language not be universal? Aren't we just talking about, like, advanced pantomime here?
It's a really fair pushback,
Hmm.
but there is a huge difference between, getting your point across and language.
Hmm.
Today we're diving into a chapter by Bensi Wool on the evolution and linguistics of sign language.
Okay.
And the very first thing we have to do is just dismantle that universal charades myth. Because what Wool shows us is that sign languages, plural like British Sign Language or American Sign Language, they're not pantomimes. They're complex, grammatical, natural languages.
And different from each other.
Oh, completely. They're often mutually unintelligible.
So you're telling me if a deaf person from London meets a deaf person from New York, they can't just chat?
No more than I could just start chatting with someone who only speaks Cantonese. They might be able to gesture, I need water, just like you did in the market.
Right.
But they couldn't debate politics or talk about philosophy.
Yeah.
Or even just, what they did last weekend.
That is wild to me. So, okay, the mission for this deep dive has to be figuring out why. If we all have the same hands, the same bodies, the same basic needs, why wouldn't we all land on the same signs?
And to understand that, we have to look at how these languages actually evolve, how the brain builds them, and this is the incredible part, how they can spring into existence, sometimes almost from nothing.
Okay, let's back up to that universal idea, because I'm not the only one who thought this, right? This isn't just me being, like, totally ignorant.
No, not at all. In fact, for centuries, the smartest people in the world basically agreed with you. If you go back to the 17th century, all the way up to the mid-20th century, the scholarly consensus was that sign was a primitive universal language.
Primitive.
That was the bias. They thought spoken language was, for the civilized mind, and gesture was this kind of raw, almost animalistic instinct. There was this philosopher, John Bulwer, writing in 1648.
1648, so this is what, post-Renaissance?
Exactly. And he was completely convinced that gestures were the universal language of human nature. And you have to remember the context. There was this obsession with the Tower of Babel, this idea that all of humanity once spoke one perfect language before God confused us.
Right.
So people like Bulwer thought that maybe, just maybe, gesture was that original Adamic language, the language of Adam.
So the idea was if you just stopped talking, you'd sort of default back to the factory settings of humanity.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it went pretty far. There was this widespread belief that outlandish people, and that's the real term they use for, like Laplanders or Native Americans, could show up in London, meet a deaf child, and just instantly hold a conversation.
Because they were both viewed as, what, primitives?
Essentially, yes. They
Yeah.
just lumped them all together. The assumption was, since neither group used civilized speech, they must share this basic instinctual communication. Even a huge name in anthropology, Edward Tyler, in the late 1800s, was claiming the grammar of sign language was international.
It sounds like we spent 300 years just seeing what we wanted to see. So when did the bubble finally burst? When did we realize, hang on, these people aren't pantomiming, they're speaking different languages?
It took an embarrassingly long time. The pendulum really swung hard in the mid-20th century. Linguists finally started doing the field work, really, to prove that sign languages were real languages.
And they found?
They found that not only are they not universal, but the variety is just It's staggering.
There's a number in the text that really drove this home for me, the ethnologue list.
Yes, ethnologue lists 170 different sign languages currently in use. And Benzie Wohl argues that's probably a massive undercount.
An undercount.
Yeah, because there's so many local village sign languages that just haven't been documented yet.
170. But okay, here's the part that really confuses me. You said a deaf person from London and one from New York can't understand each other. But the UK and the US both speak English.
And this is the hardest thing for hearing people to wrap their heads around. We assume sign language is just, encoding the spoken language around it. Like you take the English word dog and just turn it into a hand signal.
Yeah, like Morse code for your hands.
Exactly. But it's not. Sign languages are totally independent systems. They have their own family trees that have nothing to do with the spoken languages of their countries.
So American Sign Language, ASL, it's not related to British Sign Language, BSL.
Not even distant cousins. ASL is actually historically related to French Sign Language.
What?
So an American signer would have a much easier time understanding a signer from Paris than one from London.
That is so counterintuitive. Why?
It's all about the history of deaf education. A French teacher of the deaf came to America in the early 19th century and co-founded the first big school for the deaf. And he brought his French signs with him.
Oh, I see.
Meanwhile, the British developed their own system totally in isolation. So today, they're mutually unintelligible.
Can you give me an example? Like a false friend. Something that looks the same, but means something completely different.
Sure, this is a classic one. In British Sign Language, if you want to sign the word man, you make a gesture near your chin, sort of indicating a beard.
Okay, makes sense. Beard equals man. I get it.
But in American Sign Language, that exact same hand shape, in the same location with the same movement, it doesn't mean man. It means old.
Wow. Okay, I can see how that could lead to some very awkward conversations.
Exactly. Who is that man? Oh, he's old. I could see he's a man, but who is he? You just get stuck. It proves there's no universal instinct driving it. It's a vocabulary you have to learn.
Okay, so we've established they're diverse, they have their own family trees, and they aren't just for deaf people, are they?
No, and this is such a fascinating part of the story. We tend to think of sign language as a kind of disability accommodation.
Right.
But throughout history, there have been huge communities of hearing people who used sign language as a primary way to communicate.
The text brought up Plains Indian Sign Language. I'd heard of it, but I always thought it was just for, basic trading. I give you fur, you give me knife, that kind of thing.
That's the common misconception. But in 1885, there were an estimated 110,000 sign-talking Indians across tribes like the Blackfoot, Cheyenne, Sioux, Arapaho. This was not a pidgin trade language. It was a sophisticated lingua franca.
Because all the tribes spoke different spoken languages.
Exactly. If you're a Blackfoot speaker and you need to negotiate a treaty or tell a story around the fire with a Cheyenne speaker, you can't just point and grunt. They developed a full sign system with its own syntax to bridge that gap.
It's almost like a backup generator for language. If the vocal channel is blocked for any reason, humans just reroute the software to the hands.
Rerouting is the perfect word. Look at the Warlpiri people in Australia. They have these really complex cultural taboos. For instance, for a widow in a mourning ritual, speech is forbidden. You literally cannot speak.
So they sign.
The entire community, all hearing people, switches to a complex sign language. Not because they're deaf, but because the culture demands silence.
That reminds me of the Trappist monks you see in the chapter, the vow of silence.
It's the same principle. You take a vow of silence to avoid sins of the tongue, but you still have to run a monastery. You need to coordinate the harvest, ask someone to pass the butter, organize the library, so they develop complex sign systems.
Which brings us to the big question of how these languages actually get started. Because it's one thing for monks to agree on a code, but what happens when you have a bunch of deaf kids who have never been exposed to any language?
This is, I think, the most profound story in all of modern linguistics. It's the closest we have ever come to actually seeing the Big Bang of a language. We have to talk about Nicaragua.
Let's set the scene, because this is pretty recent history, right?
Oh yeah, this is the late 1970s, early 1980s. Before this, Nicaragua didn't have a public school system for the deaf. So if you were a deaf kid, you stayed at home. You were isolated. You might have a few home signs, little gestures you invented so your family knew you were hungry, but you had no language, no grammar, no community.
You're living in a bubble.
A bubble of one. Then the government opens a school. For the first time, hundreds of these isolated deaf kids are brought together in the same building on a bus every single day.
And the teachers, I assume, tried to teach them Spanish.
They tried to teach them to lip read Spanish and to speak.
Hmm.
And it was a complete disaster. It just failed. The kids couldn't grasp it. They had no foundation in sound.
So the teachers are failing inside the classroom, but something else is happening on the playground.
The kids started to talk to each other. They took those little home signs they all brought from their individual bubbles, and they started mashing them together.
So like a pidgin language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The first generation created a really rough communication system.
Yeah.
It was choppy, not much grammar. But they could communicate. But then, and this is the part that gives you chills, the next wave of younger kids arrived.
The little one.
The little ones. And they watched the older kids signing this rough, choppy pidgin. And their brains, these young plastic brains just hungry for structure, they didn't just copy it.
What did they do?
They regularized it. They added grammar. They added syntax.
Wait, they added rules that weren't there before?
Yes, spontaneously.
Hmm.
Within just 3 generations of students, we're talking maybe 10 to 15 years, they had created a fully grammatical, complex language from scratch. Nicaraguan Sign Language.
That is mind-blowing. The adults didn't teach it. The older kids didn't really have it. The babies just invented grammar.
It suggests that grammar isn't something we just learn from a book. It's something our brains are wired to generate. If you give a community of humans a reason to talk, they will build a language. It's an instinct.
So if the brain is treating this just like a spoken language, it must have the same parts, right? I remember from like high school English that language has phonology sounds, but sign has no sound. So how does that work?
This was the stumbling block for linguists for decades. They said, no sound, no phones, no language. End of story. But then in 1960, a linguist named William Stokoe looked closer, and he realized that sign languages have visual phones.
Visual phones. So what are the building blocks if not vowels and consonants?
He boiled it down to 3 main parameters: hand shape, location, and movement.
Hand shape, location, movement, okay?
Think of it like a combination lock. To make a word, you need the right shape in the right place, moving the right way. If you change just one of those things, you change the word completely.
Okay, can we try to visualize this? Give me a minimal pair. 2 words that are almost identical except for one little thing.
Okay, let's use ASL. Make a fist, but with your index finger extended.
Okay, got it. Pointing finger.
Now, if you take that hand shape and pull it across your forehead, kind of bending the fingers slightly as you go, that is the sign for summer.
Okay, summer on my forehead. Got it.
Now, keep the exact same hand shape, give the exact same movement, but change the location down to your nose.
Okay.
That now means ugly.
Wow. So the difference between a sunny day and an ugly day is just 2 inches on my face.
Precisely. Just like the difference between pat and bat in English is a tiny little vibration in your vocal cords. It's a rigorous system.
But the text mentions that sign can do things spoken language actually can't. Like, spoken language is linear. I have to say one sound after another. I can't say 3 in weeks at the same time.
You're stuck in time, exactly. But sign language is 3-dimensional. It allows for what's called simultaneity.
How does that work?
So take your example, 3 weeks. In English, that's 2 separate words. In many sign languages, you take the hand shape for the number 3, and you perform the movement for the sign week using that number 3 hand shape.
So you're literally signing 3 weeks in a single flash.
One simultaneous packet of information. It's incredibly efficient.
There was one example in the book that I really struggled to picture, and I want you to walk me through it. It's the cup example, about how signers use space to tell a story.
Ah, yes. This is all about syntactic space. And this is where sign language really just, it leaves spoken language in the dust.
Okay, help me out. The sentence is simple. The woman hands the cup to the boy. In English, I just say those words in a line. How does a signer do it?
Okay, so imagine a little stage in the space in front of you. A signer doesn't just sign the word boy. They'll sign boy, and then they'll place him somewhere. Let's say they point to their left. That invisible spot on the left is now the boy.
Okay, the boy is on the left.
And they'll sign woman and place her on the right.
Woman on the right.
Now, to show the transfer of the cup, they don't have to sign she gave it to him. They form their hand into the shape of a cup, and they physically move that cup hand from the woman spot on the right across the stage to the boy spot on the left.
Oh, I see. They are literally acting out the transfer in the air.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But grammatically, they're showing the subject, the object, and the verb all at once just by moving through that pre-established space.
Right.
It's like painting a picture that moves.
That feels so much more intuitive than grammar charts.
It feels intuitive, but there's a huge debate about it. Is that really grammar, or is it just topographic mapping, like you're moving toy soldiers around on a map? A researcher named Liddell argues it's a mix of both. He says when you point to that spot for the boy, you're blending a linguistic element with a pure gesture. It really blurs the lines.
It seems like sign language breaks a lot of the rules we thought were set in stone.
It really does.
Which brings me to the brain. Because with all this spatial mapping, placing boys here, moving cups there, I would absolutely assume this is all happening in the right hemisphere, the artistic, spatial side of the brain.
That would be the logical guess, 100%. But if you put a signer in an fMRI machine, that is not what you see.
What do you see?
You see the left hemisphere lighting up like a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
Broca's area, Wernicke's area. The classical language centers that we use to process spoken English, or German, or Swahili.
So the brain literally doesn't care if it's seeing the words instead of hearing them.
It doesn't care at all. To the brain, language is this abstract set of rules. It doesn't matter if the input comes from the ear or the eye, it just recognizes the pattern.
That is so validating for sign language. But then the chapter throws this curveball with bilingualism, and this is where my brain really started to hurt.
The unimodal versus bimodal distinction.
Right. So I speak English and a little bit of Spanish. I'm unimodal. Two spoken languages. If I try to speak both at the same time, it's just noise. I only have one mouth.
Right, you can't sing two different songs at once. You have production bottleneck.
But a bimodal, bilingual, is someone who speaks a language and signs a language.
Exactly. They have two completely different output channels, a mouth and a pair of hands.
And the research shows they can use them both at the exact same time.
Yes. It's called code blending. They can speak the English sentence, I am going home, while simultaneously signing the ASL equivalent.
Whoa.
It's not like singing two songs, it's like singing while you play the guitar. The two systems can harmonize.
That changes how I think about thinking. It means we can access two different words from two different mental dictionaries at the same time, as long as the body can keep up.
It gives us this incredible window into cognitive processing. It suggests our language capacity is much more robust and parallel than we ever realized. We just don't usually have the hardware to show it.
So, wow. We've gone from 17th century philosophers thinking sign was savage, to Nicaraguan kids literally inventing grammar on a playground, to realizing our brains are language supercomputers just waiting for an output.
It's quite a journey.
When you look at all of this, what's the one thing you really want people to take away from this deep dive?
I think we have to stop thinking of sign language as a substitute for speech. It's not the backup plan. It's a spotlight on what language actually is.
What do you mean by that?
For most of human history, we've conflated language with speech. If you didn't speak, you weren't fully human. Sign linguistics proves that language is a mental instinct, completely separate from the mouth. The hands are just as much an organ of language as the tongue is.
It's the software, not the hardware.
Exactly. And the fact that it just erupts spontaneously like it did in Nicaragua shows just how desperate the human species is to connect. We will build a bridge out of anything we have.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought to chew on. We started this whole thing laughing at the idea of a universal language. And we know now that the signs aren't universal. An American handshake means nothing to a British signer. But maybe those 17th century guys weren't entirely wrong. The signs aren't universal, but the instinct to create them is. Whether it's 110,000 Plains Indians on the prairie or a handful of kids in a Nicaraguan school, if you put humans together, they will find a way to be understood. And that drive, maybe that is the only true universal language there is.
Beautifully put.
Thanks for deep diving with us.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.